Hello, friends. Welcome back to Spellhaven, a place where all are welcome. So come on in, have a seat, and let's learn to run D&D together. My name is Jaren, and this is my Roll20 crash course for 2024, part number 2. Today we're talking about maps. In our first video, we went a little bit over the tools of Roll20, our tools off to the left-hand side, our options and different categories for different tools and things we have over on the right, which I'm going to minimize for this video for the most part. And then our different layers, which are on the bottom left-hand side, and how the system of layers works within Roll20. So today we're going to talk about maps and a little bit about what we're covering today. We'll take a look at gridded versus non-gridded maps. We'll talk a little bit about customizing your map and adding some custom features or custom assets. We'll get into the dynamic lighting of maps, and then we'll talk about maps functioning more as a card, like a visual representation for your players to kind of proc the imagination and theater of the mind. Because again, with playing online, the more ways you can engage the senses, the better attention retention you will have. The more players are going to be paying attention to your game. So the map layer, something that players can see but not interact with. They're going to be able to see everything on the map layer. They can't touch anything or move anything around in there, which is what you want. You yourself, as the dungeon master, you can see it and interact with it. You can interact with it only if you're actually on that layer. So taking a look here, by default, you're going to be on the token layer. If you want to mess with stuff on the map layer, you got to be on the map layer. So first, let's go ahead and click that. And then adding things into Roll20 is as simple as dragging an image from your computer and dragging it right onto Roll20 itself. And before I get into any of the actual maps, I will give a little bit of a disclaimer. If you're just using Roll20 for your friends at home, you can probably use whatever you want and it's going to be fine. If you're trying to stream a game or using it more commercially, at the very minimum, at least give credit where credit is due. And if you can financially support these creators, please do so. They are working hard to make these things look nice. That said, any of the maps that I'm using today are maps that I've either paid for or they came for free. So I'm in the clear there, or they came with a pre-built adventure that I purchased, for example. So just a little bit of a disclaimer there. So let's get into it. And in order to avoid watching a map load, because sometimes it takes a little bit of a minute, especially if you're using bigger file sizes, in order to avoid that, I've gone ahead and dragged my maps in already, but I've just left them there because I want to edit them and show you in real time how this all works. So navigating between pages on Roll20, you click this folder at the top right. This is where all your pages are going to be located. So I'm going to go through maps with no grid, gridded maps, and we'll make a card. This is really nice. They redid this at the later part of last year. So it's as simple as clicking add page, and you can go and edit some settings there. I actually don't need this, so I think I should be able to just delete it. You can also make folders. So for example, I could group all these into a folder just for video number 2 if I wanted to, which is really handy if you're running like a pre-made adventure or your campaign, your homebrew campaign has arcs to it. You can group everything together in one category in one folder, and it's really easy to keep track of where everything is. As far as this is the other neat feature of Roll20, you can move your players around and you are on a different page getting that ready for them. So you might not be ready to have players see what you're working on. You can have them be looking at something completely different. And that is done by just dragging and dropping this yellow flag here, which it is, there we go. Roll20 was being goofy. So if this was something my players were looking at, their screen would be changing, mine staying the same. In order for me to move to that, I have to actually click the page itself. So I'll click there. And you can see this already looks kind of odd. It's like, well, I can see something's been dragged onto there, but what is going on? I can't click it. I'm on the map layer. And if I look, it's a little bit transparent because I don't have this on the right layer. I have this on the tokens layer. So if you happen to drag something in and you're like, I'm on the map layer, why can't I do anything with it? You probably just put it on the wrong layer. In order to put it on the right layer. You don't have to delete it and redo it. Simply right click on the thing you want to move around. Brings up this menu for all sorts of options. We want layer, and then we'll go to map layer. Now we know it's on the map layer because we see the pre-built grid that Roll20 has. So now I'm going to click over to the map layer, and now I can move this around here. I can drag it up to the top left, make sure it's aligned properly, and I see that the map's probably too big for the page. So what I can do, go up to this folder, go to page settings, this little gear on the upper right, and we need to adjust the page so it's big enough for our image. I'm going to way overshoot it, because generally that's kind of what you do. You kind of go a little too far, and then you back it up, and I can see, yeah, I got quite a ways to go. So let's keep editing here. We need to go slimmer and shorter. I think I went too slim. I need to go 5 units shorter. Let's test it out. And we actually were at the right width. So now it is fit to the page. Or you can also just drag and drop the image out to the right size if that's what you want to do too. You can see when an item is selected here, it has these clickable, I mean, much like any image in any image editor that you've probably ever used, you can click and resize it that way. Or if you say, okay, this is the appropriate scale, you just can refit it to the page. Now we see, so this image did not have a grid to start, but we are seeing some grid here, and that is because Roll20 has a pre-built grid if you so choose. So go back to settings, and I can set in this scale section of the settings, the grid distance. I can say I want each grid square to be 5 feet, or an odd number of feet if you want to, or 10 feet. Maybe I want it to be kilometers for some reason, or miles if I'm working on like a world map. If I don't want the grid on, I just turn it off here, and now we see no grid. So you could do that. I want it on because I'm kind of demonstrating this. You don't even have to use squares. Maybe you want to make a hex map, and now you've got hexes. And you have all these different, maybe you're kind of having a 3-dimensional map, and so you want something a little bit different that way. I'm going to keep it to squares. And the other thing that I would mess with, that I frequently do, I don't know why I exit out of that. Let's go back here, is the grid opacity. So it's kind of hard to see. What I want is something that's visible for players so they can see where they are. So I want to have a little bit of a darker color, and I want to mess with the opacity a little bit. I think I went the wrong way. This way? No, I did go the right way. I just need a darker color. So if I turn it to complete black and opacity all the way to the right, now it's definitely a grid that people can see. And this way you're able to test out actually the scale of your map. We can use this measurement tool that we talked about in the first video and see, okay, this building is about 40 feet, and it's still defaulted to the last thing that I was on. I want lines. And I want to go to instant. This building's about 40 feet in length. It's, 20 to 30 feet across. That's probably good enough. Our trees are going to be 10 feet, 5 to 10 feet, maybe 15 feet for bigger ones across. This scale looks pretty good. So that's the quick and easy drag and drop any sort of map that you want to use onto Roll20, resize it, resize the page, change the grid and the grid opacity, and you're ready to roll. And now, as long as your players have control over their tokens are going to snap to this grid. You can turn that off. Maybe you don't want a snap to grid function. You can turn that off by just turning the grid off itself. And now if you turn the grid off, now whenever players drag a token around, there's nothing to snap to because there's no grid. So that is that. But what if we have a map, you ask? What if we've got a map that already has a grid on it? And I did the same thing here. I drug it on, and it is on the token layer. So I want to put it on the map layer. So let's go do that really quickly. Again, I right-clicked on it. Oops, I moved it already. I right-clicked on it and I selected which layer I wanted to put it to. Since I now have it on the map layer, it's correct. But this one is a little bit sized. It's sized a little differently. And also, as I bring it up here, you can see, well, wait a second. This map already has a grid. How am I going to make this work? And yes, you could do it the incredibly tedious hard way of resizing the image, resizing the page, resizing the image until you get those squares to line up perfectly. But my friends, there's an easier way. What we need to do is right click on the map and we'll go to, where is it? I think it's under advanced and align to grid. And now what it's going to ask us to do is to draw a 3x3 box. And it's going to attempt to fit that 3x3 box to the grid that Roll20 has built into it. So you don't need to be perfect. As long as you get pretty close, it's going to be good enough. So I'm going to attempt to do this on the first try, and we'll see. I'm even a little bit off here, but this should work pretty good. Line to grid, and you can see it's slightly off. In fact, I think because this map, the grid doesn't start at the exact edge, it's going to be a little off. Let's just check it out here. Now what I want to do is align it to the top left and right and then resize the page. And then I'll start tweaking some other things. So same as before, let's go up to the settings. And I need to, let's start by making this wider than it needs to be. And I'll figure out where I need to go from there. We need to keep going. 40 is probably where it's at. 41 maybe. Okay. And now we can see these grids still are not lining up. And I think probably what happened was because the grid on the map I put it on the page doesn't go all the way to the edge, doesn't start at the top left, it's going to get kind of screwy. So what I can do, if you try to move things around, you'll notice that because I have a grid established, it still tries to snap everything to the grid. And, that kind of doesn't work for my purposes. So what you can do is hold down, I believe it is the control key, and drag your asset until it lines up pretty good. The align to grid might not have worked. Sometimes it's a little bit off. I think it's the Alt key, not the Control key on Windows. If you hold Alt and drag something and let it go, then it will just land wherever you want. I'm going to retry this because it's still not lining up. So again, I'll right click. Whoa, something happened with Roll20. I will right click on the object, align to grid. Let's draw our 3x3 grid. 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it works this time. I think that's still off. Let's try aligning it best we can. So I think we can get fairly close. Yeah, this one's gonna be kind of weird. I'm wondering if these grid lines. Are actually even on the map. Let me try one last thing here, and then I'm gonna move on. Sometimes the aligned to grid is a little bit wonky. I'm gonna resize the heck out of this thing. Maybe because it's too close, it's having a hard time getting there. So let me just make it a lot smaller and resize it and do all sorts of weird stuff. And then I'll try drawing the grid again. So we go to advance, align to grid, draw our 3x3, and it's definitely not squares anymore. So I'm hoping because it's a little bit wonky now, it's gonna go, okay, it's too far away from being anything resembling a grid, so we need to really adjust this. Let's draw our 3x3. 1, 2, and 3 down. Hold down Alt and move this map around. It still feels like it's pretty off. Yeah, this map is still a little off. I'm wondering if the grid lines itself are even. How close is this? Closer. Well, the main point I wanted to make here is that these established grid lines on Roll20 are mainly for snap to grid functionality. I think we're getting a lot closer. So as long as you're pretty close, it doesn't need to be exact, because what this functionality is for your player tokens aligning to the grid that's drawn on the map you uploaded. I think we got pretty close. I just resized a couple of things here because it was not all the way to the edge. So I think we're pretty close. Last thing that I would need to do is adjust the page size again. I'll go do that really quickly. I think this is 5 shorter, maybe. We need one more. And now we're pretty close. The last thing to do here is, because you can still see 2 grids, right? You can still see one is overlapping the other. So you might be thinking we could just go into the page settings itself, turn off the grid, but that doesn't really work, because then nothing snaps to the grid. So what we can do is just turn the opacity all the way down. And now you can't see the Roll20 grid. You can see the grid that was drawn on the map, and now player tokens will snap to that position as long as we've aligned things properly. They're still going to align to the Roll20 grid, but we've made that Roll20 grid and the map grid the same, so it should function properly. We've got this behind the scenes functionality that's not based on the map that we just uploaded. So that's how to do that. Sorry, that was a bit of a headache, but we finally got there. So that is that map. And then lastly, we'll take a look at a map as a card. Again, I've put this map, I just drug it in here. It needs to be put over to the map layer. So again, right click on the object, put this on map layer. Now we know it's on map layer because we can see the grid. Let's go over to map layer and just resize this. Now the scaling here obviously doesn't matter because we're not using the grid as a grid. So I can just bring this out until it fits the page. If that width is good enough, we'll just adjust the height. Need to go a little more. Might have been too many. There we go. And then lastly, because we're not using this as a map per se, we're not putting tokens on here, we don't need to do any of that. We can actually go into the page settings and just turn the grid off. So let's do that. And now when players see this, when we go up to here and we drag the player flag over to this page, they see this page and they go, oh, okay, we're in a frozen tundra. This was from Rime of the Frost Maiden. Oh, okay, I kind of get an idea. I can put myself in first person and I get an idea of the kind of place that we're in. I don't have to imagine it. I'm looking at it. It just helps me remember. Another way that you could do something like that is, as I briefly mentioned in the first video, if we go over to the player journal, you could also say, okay, I'm going to make a handout. I'm going to put that image here and we're going to call it Frozen Tundra. And we're going to put this in all players' journals, and then you drag and drop the image there. And then once players have this in their journal, they can just take a look at this. Or you could go into your own journal and say, show it to players. That's another way you could do that. If you wanted to use something that was like a card. So I think what is left, we need to talk about customization and dynamic lighting. We kind of covered these two a little bit out of order. So let's go back. Let's go to this map, our gridded map, the one that we just did that's kind of wonky. So this map has a lot of great things on it, but what if I wanted to add more great things to it? If you have assets already on your own computer, great. I often don't. Often my inspiration comes in the moment. So what you can do, we'll go over to Art Library. This happens to have all of my assets that I've ever used uploaded to it. But I want to search. Let's click over to Premium Assets. We'll search the web. And I can search, let's say, I'm going to add more tents. So I'll search for tent. And it will not only search from my own library, anything that I have uploaded, it will search from the web as well. And I click down here. I'm going to close this up. I don't need this. Marketplace purchases, no. From the web, it does a search for you, anything that you can drag into Roll20. And it might not be something that you can immediately use because I just searched for tent. So it's going to come up with anything that might be tent adjacent. I don't want circus tent, but this kind of looks nice. And I should be able to simply drag this into Roll20. And I got this tent that I can play around with. Much as the same way as with maps. One, we want to make sure this is on the right layer. I'm on the map layer. I'm not ready to so here's a little bit of an editing insight, I guess, from me doing it the wrong way too many times. I obviously want this on the map layer at some point. If I do it right now and I click things around, I might accidentally click my map and move that around. I might have a bunch of assets that I don't want to get messed up. I'm going to Control Z this and it'll move it back. So what I recommend you do, if you are adding assets to a map that you're eventually going to have on the map, do this on a different layer. Keep them all separate so you don't accidentally move some stuff around. I'm going to right click this, put this on tokens. Now I can still see the map. I can't move the map around because I'm on the token layer, but I can move this sucker around all day and I can resize it and turn it. If I want this to be a gigantic tent, I can do that. I can shrink it down and make it a one-man tent. Just as before, if I don't want this to be resized snap to grid, I can hold down Alt and resize it and get it very, very customized. I can do the same thing for positioning. It doesn't have to snap to the grid. I can position it very accurately. With this, it's maybe kind of hard to see because of the contrast. As I have it selected, it has this one that's kind of jutting out from the rest of the little handles here. This is for turning. So I can turn this. If I'm not holding Alt, it's going to default try to snap to a grid in, I believe, 45-degree chunks. But if I hold down Alt, I can, you know, it doesn't have to snap to the grid that way. I can really customize this and position it however I want to. There's even, you can even, you know, adjust the color with tint, you know, so, and it's not perfect, you know, but you can start to adjust some of these assets. I think I don't want anything on it. You can adjust some of these assets to, you know, be a little bit more customized. And I've even done this so far as creating entire different layers to maps to add some dimensions to it. Building out a whole floors and walls and columns and stuff. So you can kind of go nuts with this. And all this stuff is pretty simple to use. You might occasionally come across assets that, like this, for example, it's like an entire full square that, you know, obviously this isn't going to work because it's, you know, I would only want the middle actual asset, not the whole underlying ground that goes with it. So sometimes you get assets that are like that you know can't really use, but most of the time there are these transparent assets that only are the one thing, and then you can kind of customize them as you wish. Lastly, I wonder if there's anything in here. Okay, I'll just do a little bit of a demonstration with this map. It's not the best to do this, but I want to briefly show dynamic lighting. So dynamic lighting is all that stuff that when your players move tokens around, the lighting changes just for them. It makes it really immersive and kind of adds some mystery to it. So how do we do that? By default, it's not turned on. We have to go into the page itself, into page settings, and we go to dynamic lighting, click it, enabled it. I wouldn't worry so much about these other options. It gets into some of these are kind of outdated and they're a little bit more customized. For 99% of the time, this simple dynamic lighting is going to be just fine. And so now it tints a little bit because we haven't really established the sight lines, where we want light to be. We don't have light sources. So how do we go in and play with this? Well, we go to our dynamic lighting layer. And here, this is a layer that no one sees. You only get to see it if you're actually on this layer. It's not something that anybody can mess with. It's simply for establishing some behind the scenes rules for how lighting works on this specific map. As long as you have dynamic lighting turned on and your player tokens have their dynamic lighting set up properly. I think in the next video we'll go over making some tokens, and I'll have a different map, I think, to demonstrate how dynamic lighting looks for players. So for this purpose, all we're going to do is draw lines. We're going to draw some walls, right? My recommendation is to have a color coded system that makes sense to you. When I started using dynamic lighting, hot pink was for walls, and I think I used orange for doors because I don't know. So I want to click on, we want lines, and I think, actually what we don't want freehand lines, we want polygon. And I want to click on hot pink, and I'm making a regular wall. So we have line thicknesses, thin to extra large. We also have different types of lighting. We can make walls, we can make single way walls, we can flip the direction, and we also have transparent walls. This is for making barriers if you don't want players to go beyond certain areas. I don't particularly use this that much, but we'll use a few of these, I think. So to make these, it's just a matter of just point and click. So I want to draw walls, and what I want to do is draw them such that it's not going to block what players can see. So if a player was looking, let's say for example, this building didn't have a roof and we could see inside the actual building. So sometimes when a player goes into the building, they suddenly can see everything that's in there, except for things that are behind walls and doors and stuff. On the outside, they can't see in. So I want to draw walls that still allow them to see the outside of the building. So I might do it something like this. I might draw something like this. And we get to the end, and if you manage to connect the lines, it'll just end it for you. You can also right click to end a series if you're just drawing a wall that's not a complete enclosed section. So it's as simple as this. And now what this will appear to as players is they won't see beyond this line. They will see the edge of the building here. So maybe on this particular map, this is not what you would want to do, but I'm just using this as an example. I'll show a better example when I start to add tokens to a map, but if I wanted to do, maybe you have trees and you want players to know that it's something that they can kind of duck behind and maybe not see around. How would you set up trees? And I have seen a few different ways to do it and tried it a few different ways. The way I would not recommend doing it is to try and draw a border around the whole entire tree, because then you kind of lose sense of what this is. You only see the very edges of this and are like, is that a bush or what is this? I can't really tell. And it produces this weird shadow as well, because it's basically a big pillar that whenever a token's behind it, they don't get to see what's on the other side. So instead, and by the way, you might have realized these are all assets that you can change just like tokens, just like the map. Everything's an asset, basically. What I would recommend for doing for trees, we'll go back to polygon, and I'm just going to draw lines, and I'm just going to make X's or crosses. So I make one line, and you just want to make it big enough to be noticeable. I'll make a line, right click to say that that one's done. Draw another one, say that that one's done. And that's all you do. Right? That's all you need to do. And now when players are seeing this, they'll see that this is a tree, and they'll see that they can't see things around it and kind of duck behind it if they want to, but it doesn't really obscure what this actually is. For things like windows, what we might want to draw, you probably want to draw something that's transparent. And now I'm going to draw something that's, or maybe you also use this for, well, you'd use this for windows because doors are usually not transparent. But what you would want to do in this case, I would probably not draw an enclosed box like this. I'd probably stop wherever the window was. So I would do something like, we have walls. I would do something like, we'll draw this. And say the other one is here. Let's connect that. And then I would I'll change the color so I know what this is something different. And I think what I'm going to do is make it a little bit bigger. Oh, that's neat. They actually changed that as well. This used to be a solid line, but it seems like they've changed it. Let's make it a little bit bigger so I can actually grab onto it. So now this should represent a window that players can see through but can't pass through, right? And if I wanted to draw something that was, I like that they did this so that it visually looks like something different to you who's messing with the dynamic lighting. If I wanted to make something that was more like a door, I don't want the whole thing. I just want this. Let's delete that. We would do something like, maybe not one way. Actually, that's not what that would be used for. We would still want to do a wall, but I would change the color. So if I was going to make something that wasn't a wall, maybe it's a doorway that's going to be moved at some point. I'm just going to draw a single line. We'll make sure that this covers all I needed to cover. And now players are here. Let's say they open the door. All I got to do is move it. Simple as that. I need to make sure that I'm on the dynamic lighting layer, obviously, but that's how you could do a door. And then what is, maybe not a good map to demonstrate this, but I can still do it anyways. What is this last one that was one way? This is really neat if you have a combat map that's got different levels to it, where players can clearly see that there's the high ground that they want to get the advantage and upper hand on. You could use one way to illustrate and visually represent the fact that when you're up high, you can see down to down below, but you probably can't see up to the top. So you could draw something like, let's just say that this tree line was a ridge, for example. I could go back into Polygon and I will draw, let's pick red for one way. And I could draw a contour here. I'm just clicking. And now I'm done. And I think this is the wrong way. You might have to go in as a player and check this out to actually see. And we'll do that in the next video, how to view this as a player once we start adding in tokens. You might need to do this the other way. It's simple as selecting it. We'll flip direction. I think that's correct now. Now I think anything that's on this side can look down to here, but anything that's on this side is not going to be able to see beyond this barrier. So it's a neat way to sort of reward having the higher ground. I don't want this, so let's delete that. And anything else I want to do with dynamic lighting? I think that might be it. One last nice thing about this is you'll notice I was moving around as I was drawing this, because sometimes you might have something that you don't want real, low resolution. You want a nice curve, right? And you don't want to have to go through and try to draw circles and stuff. So you go, okay, well, I'm going to zoom way in and make sure I get really accurate, but I'm still in the middle of a line. What's nice is you can still, I'm going to make a wall here. You can still just keep clicking and dragging, and right mouse click to drag the screen around while you're doing this stuff. So I can be in the middle of making a line. And I go, wait, I need to see more. I'm still in the middle of making a line. If I click again, it's going to make more lines. But if I right click and hold, it's going to allow me to still move around the map. I can even scroll wheel to zoom out if I want to. So you don't have to get out of edit mode of drawing your lines. in order to still move around the map. And then when you're done with your line, right click again and you're done. So it's right click and hold to move around the map. I think that about covers it for maps. Next video, we'll talk about tokens and the fact that and how to add tokens. It's just as simple as adding in map assets. But we'll talk about, since I went in and enabled dynamic lighting, we need to go and set that up for tokens as well to make sure that they have it turned on and they can use it and that they have their lighting set up properly. Now, one last thing I will say is if you are making like a dungeon or you're making buildings that you want players to be able to explore around and you know that there's light sources in there, one thing that you can do, you'll need to do, is set up lights for that building. It's not built in. Just because you drew walls doesn't mean there's lights. So we need to set that up. So what we can do here, let me just search for, we'll go for, actually, let's go for, we'll go for, let's say lamp. And we'll see what's on the web. Is there anything that looks good enough? You know what? I'm going to search for torch instead. I probably have some torches in my library, but I want to grab something from the web. So yeah, this is reasonable enough. I don't know where it went to. Let's try this again. Let's go back to tokens and drag it over to tokens. There we go. So now this is on our token layer. Let's turn it. We'll just put it out here just for fun, just to demonstrate. I don't know why that's so transparent. I'm on the token layer. Maybe it's just a transparent asset. But what, again, just because I've added an asset doesn't mean anything. What I want to do is go over here to lighting. And I can place a light. And I think this is not an asset that people can see. It is just an effect. And you can even come in here and adjust. You should be able to adjust this lighting. Maybe it's just a built-in function that the light has. But this is one way that you could add lights. You could also just come into the asset itself and say, I'm going to give this an aura of, let's say, 30 feet. That's way too much. And that wouldn't actually work. This is probably not the right way to do it. I think you use these auras for like token effects. Like, hey, I've got you know, a 30 foot radius of healing or something like that. So actually, I'm gonna take that back. Don't do it that way. That's the wrong way to do it. Oh, there we go. One last thing that I forgot about is you can actually add windows and doors a quicker way. This is a newer feature, so I completely forgot about it. On this lighting tool is doors and windows. So if I wanted to go over to my lighting, let's get rid of this door, and now let's add in a door here, and we can say it's a secret door, locked door, or open a door. Locked door means tokens cannot open the door, right? If it's not locked, they can open it, and secret, I don't think they can see it. Open is just obviously opened. So I can put a door down here, and I'll need to adjust it. So yeah, I completely forgot about this. This is a really handy tool. It's as easy as simply click and drag. I can put down windows, which have their own built-in functionality, which is you can see through them, and they're also able to be opened and not opened, just like doors. Play around with that, see if that works for you, if it's easier to simply draw lines and move them in your game. You might find one is easier than the other, but that is another option for your lighting. So I'm going to delete everything and I'm going to find a better map to illustrate dynamic lighting, one that's more of like a dungeon. And then we'll get into tokens in the next video. I'm already getting a little bit lengthy here, so thank you for sticking around if you made it this far. We'll be back for more. Thanks for watching.